Hello, Garland Nixon here. Wow, I'm having a little bit of trouble here, but at any rate, um, I wasn't quite up and ready to roll. I don't know what's happening here. I think I'm going live. Do I see some people? Yes, I see some people. I think we're live. Um, and we're going to get this thing figured out. Actually, what happened was I started to go live. There we go. I'm up. I'm rolling. I'm going. I started to go live and I saw something that said Twitch says that the name is invalid, so you'll have to come with another name. And I'm like, who the hell watches Twitch anyway? So, I didn't do my normal 20-minute, 20-second countdown. Forgive me. Let's go. What I wanted to talk about here, and it's weird because that throws you off a little bit. I'm used to hearing the little thing and seeing the countdown and clicking over here and this and that. And when you do something differently, your brain doesn't operate the same, right? All right, so let's get going. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just do a second of it so my brain can watch this. How's that? There we go. So now we're ready to go. We're ready to click. We're ready to roll. I thought about this and I thought, I need to do this because this is what I'm thinking. This is what a lot of people are thinking. And, I was thinking to myself today, in Germany in the 1930s, I'm sure there were people that looked around and thought, I'm kind of uncomfortable with what's going on right now, right? And they watch certain people like, oh no, all is good, all is great. Look at that. We got the trains running on time. We've got people running the country that has that have nice crisp uniforms. And I do recall something. There was a book called The American Axis, I believe it was, and it was about people in the U.S., very, very powerful people who had supported the Third Reich. And one of the people that they talked about was Charles Lindbergh. The name like Lindbergh, should you be surprised? And they talked about, some people might have heard me tell this story before. They talked about old CL. And one of the things they said was that he had gone to Nazi Germany and been and toured, the aviation stuff they were trying to show off to him and what have you. And he left there. And when he left, he said, paraphrasing, it's pretty amazing their technological advancements. It's amazing the way they've gotten their society so orderly. They've risen from the economic ashes. They've done all of these things, and they're really, things look promising and they look brilliant. He said, but he said, for some reason, I just can't get over how stupid they are. Right? He could see that they were able to keep the trains running on time, but there was a fundamental stupidity to their view of the world. Okay. And I think you know where I'm going. Right now, the people that we have running things can't do either. I mean, let's face it. I'm not here to praise the Third Reich by any stretch of the imagination. I'd have been in an oven, quicker than you can throw in a friggin' apple pie. But my point is, and most of my friends, ideological comrades, etc., would have. All of us would have, because we're pushing back against the system, right? Everybody in the chat, you guys push against the system. Guess what? You'd be right there too. But I think my point is that when we look around today, we see a similar ideological view, and we see a kind of a similar stupidity, but probably an even worse stupidity, because the people that we have now are in like a weird dream world, and they're trying to pretend that they're the nice guys. At least the Third Reich didn't try to pretend like they were the nice guys. They just pretended like they were like, hey, straight out, look, we're superior to everybody, so we can just kill whoever we want, which is most everybody, right? Let's look at some things right now that should be considered when you're thinking about my argument. And I'm making the argument that right now, this is Reich 3.1. That's my position. Reich 3.1. Let's look at some details and see what we got. I'm going to go through some data. Let's start here. So after World War II supposedly ended, what happened to the Nazis? Well, there's a book that I got this from called the book Reawakens, right? Or the Beast Reawakens, and it talks about what happened to the Nazis after World War II. Well, let's start here. Nazi war criminals became high-ranking commanders in NATO after World War II, right? Let's find this. The most famous of them was Adolf Heisinger, chief of the operation from 1944. Okay. He was Hitler's chief of staff and helped plan the Nazis' invasions of Poland, Norway, Denmark, and France. He was promoted to colonel on August 1, 1940, became chief of the opera, whatever the hell is that, 1940, making him number 3 in the army planning hierarchy after the war. The German war criminal, the man who helped Hitler plan and execute his invasion of neighboring countries, which directly led to the deaths of millions, was not put on trial. Quite the contrary, he was allowed to take over the new established West German army, the Bundeswehr. In 1961, he was made the chairman of the NATO military committee. Essentially, he was NATO's chief of staff. He served in that capacity until 64. He was far from the only Nazi war criminal who would later serve as top position of NATO. There's some more. Hans Speidel, Nazi general who was Erwin Rommel's chief of staff during World War II. After the war, he served in the West German army and became the supreme commander of NATO's ground forces, 1957, 1963. Johannes Steinhoff, Luftwaffe fighter pilot during World War II, recipient of the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, chairman of the NATO Military Committee, 1971 to 74, among other NATO positions beforehand. Johann von Kildmannsegg, right? General Staff Officer of the High Command of the Wehrmacht, 42 to 43. NATO's Commander-in-Chief of Allied Forces, Central Europe, 67 to 68. I could keep going on. Ernst Forber, Karl Schnell, Franz Joseph Schultz, Ferdinand Sunger, on and on and on. Lieutenant of the 24th Panzer Division in the German 6th Army, participant in the Battle of Stalingrad, adjutant to the Army High Command, recipient of the German Cross in Gold, was NATO's Commander-in-Chief of Allied Forces, Central Europe, 79 through 1983. Okay, let's keep going. Let's move on to today. Okay, let's look at something that's interesting. This is a tweet from Reuters. Let me find this. Again, here's a tweet from Reuters. As this is on X, this is a tweet from Reuters, okay? 3:15 a.m., April 21, 2023. Newly recruited servicemen for the Spartan Storm Brigade. So NATO, well, let me finish. Newly recruited servicemen for the Spartan Storm Brigade, that's the SS Brigade, practiced target firing and battlefield first aid in an undisclosed location in Ukraine's Kharkov region. A serviceman with the nom de guerre, Adolf, said they had been trained in first aid tactics and firing drills. Now, this is Reuters saying the SS Brigade, now this was an article about the NATO training the Ukrainian soldiers, the Spartan Storm, which is the SS Brigade. NATO's training the SS Brigade. And so they talked to a guy who goes by the name of Adolf. Are we to believe that you and I can look at that and say, SS Brigade, Adolf? I think I know what that means. Are we supposed to think that we can look at that and figure that out? And Reuters can't? Absolutely not. They knew what they were doing. They knew. It's kind of like an underhanded thing. It's kind of like a wink, wink, watch this. We're going to slip this by the people. We're going to get it out there, but we're not really going to say it. Let's keep going. Here's another something interesting. Let me share this. Signs of the times. Coincident. New NATO headquarters design inspired by Nazi SS lightning bolts. Look at this. This is a picture of NATO's headquarters. This is a picture of the unthinkable, of the horrific. They basically made it look like the SS on the Nazis' accoutrement. Is that an accident? Is that Solario? What is likely an unfortunate design fail? That's what they're saying. An unfortunate design fail is nonetheless disconcerting in the wake of the military coalition's major buildup along the Russian border led by German troops. Now, let's think about this for a second. If I were to build a building in Mississippi, right? And it was, I don't know, whatever, right? And it was shaped like 3 Ks, the KKK building. And someone was to look at that and say, that kind of looks like the Ku Klux Klan. And it had that little circle in the Ku Klux Klan, the red circle insignia in it. And somebody was to say, that's kind of weird. That kind of looks just like the Ku Klux Klan signal. And it's the way your building is shaped. Would anybody believe? Hey, no, that was just purely an accident. There's no possible way we could have ever imagined that that was that would have been, could be interpreted as the KKK symbol. What is it? It's a KKK symbol. Now, those are 2 things that we're supposed to think are unrelated. 3 things. NATO has a bunch of Nazi war criminals as leaders of NATO over the course of years after World War II. NATO is training Ukrainian soldiers. One of the brigades that they're training is literally the SS brigade, the Spartan Storm Brigade. And one of the guys in there that Reuters chooses to interview, specifically this guy, goes by the nom de guerre, Adolf. It's almost like they're trying to shove it in our face, right? Now, of course, sign of the times. Well, it's pure. What do they say? It's an unfortunate design fail. That's not an unfortunate design fail. How many things do you have to put together before it's no longer an unfortunate design fail? Let's keep going. Let's keep looking and seeing what we got here. German ambassador applauded the Ukrainian Waffen-SS Nazi in Berlin. The foreign ministry has claimed that its diplomat was not aware that Yaroslav Hunka fought with a notorious WW2 World War II Ukrainian-based battalion. Germany's foreign office has shrugged off the participation of its ambassador to Canada in last week's embarrassing standing ovations for a Ukrainian veteran of the Waffen-SS, saying she was unaware that he was a Nazi when she joined with Ottawa lawmakers in applauding him. Excuse me. So, members of the Canadian Parliament stood and gave long ovations for the 98-year-old Hunka when he was introduced during a visit by Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Friday. Zelensky and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau were among the enthusiastic participants in the cheers. Right? When House Speaker Anthony Rota introduced his guest to the crowd, he noted that Hunka, quote, fought for Ukrainian independence against the Russians. Isn't that interesting? He fought with Ukraine against the Russians. That don't leave a lot of people for him to be on the side of, does it? Right? Which by definition suggested that he served on the side of the fascist Axis powers. He's a Ukrainian hero, a Canadian hero, and we thank him for all of his service. The war veteran was a volunteer in the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, a Ukrainian unit which committed atrocities against Jews and Poles on the Eastern Front. Ask about how Sparwasser could fail to understand Hunka's Nazi affiliation despite being told that he fought against the Red Army. Fisher said there were other possible explanations for his role. For instance, he theorized Hunka could have been a fighter for the Polish Home Army, which fought against both German and Russian forces. Right? So, again, let's not be stupid here. There are 2 things going on here. Number one, the Canadians, who their second in charge is Christian Freeland, whose father was a Nazi, grandfather was a Nazi. You don't have to go far behind Ursula von der Leyen. You don't have to go far behind Annalena Baerbock. You don't have to go far through their family trees before, I'll put it like this. If you shake their family trees hard enough, Nazis will fall out. A whole lot of Nazis going to start falling out. Okay. So bottom line, what we got here is, again, we got Nazis running NATO. We got a NATO building shaped like a Nazi SS. We got Reuters proud. Hey, NATO is training the SS battalion. I know. Let's go talk to one of the guys in it. What does he go by? What's his code name? Adolf. Completely unrelated. Who could have figured that out, right? And what's interesting is after the heat that they got, they did an article. and they changed it, right? Not, they knew they were caught. I think they did it on purpose, but they did an article after the original article had Storm Brigade and all, and then they changed it to, it was called the like here, it's called the Spartan Storm Brigade. But look, they changed their, literally changed their article to the Storm Brigade, right? So now there's no longer, Adolf is not in there. They don't talk to a guy with a nom de gore, Adolf. All of that, they literally went in and changed the article after they got heat for that tweet. But notice one thing. They never got rid of the tweet, did they? No, because they are who they are, right? Let's see what else we got here. Here's another article. Boom, when Zelensky brought a Nazi to the Greek parliament, right? Ukrainian president brought along an Azov Nazi of Greek heritage speech to the Greek parliament, and all hell broke loose. Look, let's start here. People who, for their own ideological reasons, try to talk about the Nazis, and they're like, I've literally heard this. They are the left. Nazis were the left. Their name was the National Socialist Party, right? So therefore, they're socialists, they're left. Well, to me, when I hear people say that Joe Biden is the left, right? It becomes this. What criteria? Those words mean nothing. What criteria do you use? What standards do you use to evaluate whether somebody's a left or right or socialist? I can call myself, I don't know. Yeah, it's Garland Nixon. What is he? I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Yeah, that Garland's a Klansman. I could have him all white, and you could say he's a Klansman. Klansmen wear all white. Garland wears all white. Garland's a Klansman. Hey, Klansman, but I could call myself one. So the bottom line is you got to look at ideology. Is Joe Biden the left? Well, if you define the left by saying, like they try to in the U.S. today, they define the left by saying if you're for the rainbow flags and the Black Lives Matter masks and stuff like that, there's nothing behind it. There's no real content. There's no political content behind the whole rainbow flag movement and the Black Lives Matters. They don't care about black people or gay people. That is just using those groups as human shields so that they can continue with their evil deeds. So if you say, okay, Joe Biden's the left, why? Because he's got a rainbow flag and a Black Lives Matters mask, then okay, then you don't understand ideology. The foundation of his ideology is fascist as hell. He's a fascist, right? So if you look at the National Socialist Party of Hitler, and you say, okay, if somebody tries to say they're the left, I say, okay, the left, how they feel about trade unionists. That was their worst enemy. Interesting. How they feel about socialists and communists. That they hated them, they killed them. That was their worst enemy. Interesting left, isn't it? That's an interesting view of the left. Who did they get along with the best? Who did they support? Japan, far-right nationalist. So you're going to tell me that somebody who got along with and supported far-right nationalists and aligned and allied with far-right nationalists around the world and despised socialists, despised communists, despised everybody who was on the left, they were the left. It doesn't make sense unless you're a conservative person and you don't want to admit that they were the far right. In the same way that, let's say you're kind of a centrist right now. Joe Biden, what I refer to them in their brand of fascism is ultra-liberalism. In the same way that somebody says fascism is ultra-nationalism, yes, it is. Ultra-nationalism can very well be fascism. But the ultra-liberalism that we have now is just a different strain of fascism. The ultra-right level of fascism, to be quite frank, is more honest, because they don't try to be the good guys. They're just like, yeah, our fill in the blank ethnicity, whatever the case may be, is superior. Therefore, we got a right to beat, kill, and enslave anybody below us. At least they're honest. Now, the ultra liberal fascist, the Joe Biden blinking style of fascism, they're the good guy fascism. Really, why are you overthrowing countries? Those ultra nationalists are overthrowing countries because they're just superior, intellectually superior to all of those people, ethnically superior. Why are you doing it? Oh, no, no such thing. We're overthrowing countries because we're bringing them democracy, and we're protecting them from evildoers, and actually we're protecting them from autocrats and fascists, right? Well, both of you groups are overthrowing countries, slaughtering people, stealing their resources, going around the world, working for total world hegemony. You're doing the same thing. You're working for the same outcome. And in fact, you're using the same tactics, which is militarism and violence. The only difference between the ultra liberal fascism of a Joe Biden and the ultra nationalist fascism of, say, the Azov Battalion is the reasoning that you are using for doing things. Right. And I've also often said this: the reason that the ultra nationalist fascism aligns so well with the ultra liberal fascism is because they're both globalists. Right. The Biden administration is what? We want to rule the world, and we want a one world government, and we want to be in control of it. And what are the Azovs, and what are those, the Ukrainian brand of ultra nationalism say? We are ethnically superior to everyone. We are racially superior. So we want to rule the world, just for a different reason, but we want to rule the world. So they're both a kind of a globalist fascism. Now, there are ultra nationalists in some countries that could be considered Nazis, fascists, but they tend to say, this is what we want with our country. I could say a Netanyahu. Netanyahu is more like, we want to rule this country and this little area of the Middle East, that's ours. Netanyahu doesn't so much, his brand of fascism doesn't so much say, I want to rule the world, as God gave us this area right here, which is going to include part of Saudi Arabia, part of, whatever. You've seen the greater Israel thing, but the greater Israel doesn't encompass the whole world. It encompasses a part of the world. He's not a globalist fascist, but he's willing to align with the globalist fascists so that he can have his slice of the pie, right? It was kind of like what Japan was doing. Japan was saying, look, we don't want to rule the whole world, but we'll align with the Nazis, who kind of want to rule the whole world, but we want to rule Asia. The Japanese fascists Japanese are the king of the Asians, shall we say. We are the Asians who are ethnically superior to all other Asians, and therefore we should rule them, take all their stuff, and brutally enslave, rape, or whatever we want to do to the rest of the Asians. So if you look at a Netanyahu, hey, this part of the world, we want our chunk of the pie, and we want to have a vicious and brutal rule of it. And then, of course, they're going to fight it out internally because they can't even get along themselves. And the Japanese wanted that kind of thing. They had a region in their area. They were kind of regional fascists, regional hegemonists, as opposed to world hegemonists. Whereas now, I think the U.S. aligns much more with the original axis, with the German axis, because they want world hegemony. But they align very good with the ultranationalists in Ukraine, because the ultranationalists in Ukraine are not saying, there are many quotes there of them not saying we want to rule the Eastern, whatever, Eastern Europe and Russia. They've said we want to, Ukrainian nationalists say we want to rule the white race. So they're like, yeah, Africa, Latin America, whatever, they'll be second. But all the white people, we're going to run them. One could argue it's a form of a regional fascism, only rather than saying to rule a region, a geographical area, they're saying we want to rule an ethnic group. Now, along with that, they're going to say, and because this ethnic group is superior to everyone else, this ethnic group should rule all other ethnic groups in the world. So you see people who, at some point, if they were to get their way, right, if the US was to get its world hegemony that it wanted, and then the Nazis in Ukraine would say, hey, I got an idea, don't we get to rule the right race or something, whatever, the fascist Biden people would say, not really, we're just going to kill all you people. because I mean, you were a valuable tool while we needed you. Now we don't. You get killed. They're just going to use them until they're done with them. The same way that if the attackers at Crocus had made it into Ukraine, you know, the Ukrainians were like, yes, come here, come to get the Ukraine. And when you get here, you'll be hailed as heroes. Yeah, they've been hailed as heroes. They got a bullet in their head. They had served their purpose, and they had no more purpose, and they weren't going to feed them anymore. They were dead men. If they'd have gotten back to their masters, they'd have put a bullet in every one of their heads and threw them, you know, aside and said, no, they didn't come here. We've never seen them. I'm sorry. No, we don't know we don't know anything. That's, you know, no honor amongst thieves, as they say. But if you look at what's going on now, the United States, for one thing, is playing the Goebbels role, right? One of the things that I recall, I think it was Chris Hayes in one of his, Chris Hayes, I think it was Chris, what's his name, in one of his speeches. And he said, you know, the good Chris. But anyway, he said that I think it might have been Joe Kennedy, who was the ambassador to Germany during the Nazi period. And he had left and come home, and he went back to Germany. And he said one of the things that he astounded him was that the people in Germany had been like so brainwashed to think that they were in danger from Poland. Poland was no danger to them. Poland didn't have much of a military, still had some of its cannons, some of its artillery was being towed by horses. They were no match whatsoever for the German military, although they did fight and hold out for a lot longer than the Germans thought they would be able to. But the bottom line is they were just no match for the German military. But through careful propaganda campaigns, the German leadership was able to convince the German people that a country much weaker than them was a threat. And he said the people in Germany were like clamoring, when are you going to do something about the Poles? They're going to attack us. They're going to do this. They're going to that. They had people afraid of the Poles. Think about this. North Korea is the size of Pennsylvania. It's got what, 40 million people with California, population of California. And through careful manipulation and through propaganda, the United States is able to convince Americans that North Korea is a threat. The United States was able to convince Americans through propaganda that Iraq was a threat. Right? The United States is able to convince America. You could take a country the size of of Washington, D.C. It could have like, whatever, the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas, was it 31 square miles? You could convince Americans that St. Thomas, a small island in the Virgin Islands, might I add, that's part of the United States, that does not have a military, barely a few cops running around in Ford Broncos, for God's sake. But through careful manipulation and propaganda, our government could teach them, could convince Americans that the U.S. Virgin Islands is a threat. See, that's another part of the whole fascist thing, and that is the whole Nazi ideology, the fascist ideology, and that is when the government gets a full grip on the media, it then uses the media to manipulate the people in a direction that's not in their best interest. Keep in mind something. The job of the government is not to represent the people. What is the job of the government? That's an easy one. There is a class tension. There's a tension between the ruling elite and the masses. The ruling elite does what they want to do, right? Their plans, their overall view of the world does not align with the masses, and it doesn't work out in the best interest of the masses. And if the masses understood it, they'd know it was evil, right? So there is a tension between a tiny ruling elite who's extremely powerful, who wants to act in a way that's not in the best interest of the masses. There's a natural tension that creates between the masses and the ruling elite. And what does the state do? What is the government there to do? It's to alleviate those tensions. But remember, the government is there to tell the poor people, we're going to protect you from the rich, and tell the rich people, we're going to protect you from the poor. But in reality, they're there to alleviate the tension between the two on behalf of the ruling elite. And in Reich 3.1, which I believe we're in now, it's getting more obvious. And they create the illusion of a democracy. We're going to give you the illusion, the masses, that you pick the president, that you choose who's in charge, that you can seek redress from your elected officials. We're going to give you that all that illusion, but that ain't going to be the reality. And now that people are starting to figure it out, and now that other powers are rising in the world that are causing trouble, that are making it more difficult for our ruling elite to run the world, they can't afford the illusion so much anymore. In the same way, they can't afford the illusion in Europe that European countries are independent sovereign entities. They can't afford that illusion anymore, so they're just doing away with it, and they don't really care. They're getting careless. And there's the other issue they have is that in order to move forward with the things that they want, right? In order to move forward and go after Russia and go after China, what is that going to do? It's because Russia supplies cheap energy to Europe, and China supplies cheap things, cheap products, and these things benefit Europe. They allow the Europeans and the Americans, of course, to live a better life. You can buy stuff that you couldn't otherwise afford, and you can have jobs because you've got cheap energy and your factories are running, right? And the ruling elite look at that and they say, yeah, but we won't run everything. And our system won't work if we don't run everything. If we can't steal all the natural resources of these other countries, and these other countries are now saying, the weaker countries are now saying, well, China will buy our stuff, Russia will buy our stuff, and they'll help protect us from you. So now the people in charge of Reich 3.1 say, well, here's what we're going to do. We got to put the people, we got to impoverish the working class. We have to put them under full control, because one of the ways they keep you under control is impoverishment. If you're barely trying to survive, if you're so busy working 3 and 4 jobs, or you have no job, or you're figuring out how you're going to make it, you're homeless, whatever, it's very, very difficult for you to stand up against the ruling elite, to stand up against the government. If you're just trying to survive, you're just trying to get your next meal. So you don't have time to sit around and read and organize and work together to try to overthrow them, or to try to get the people that you want in power if you're in desperation. So part of the game is to keep the masses in desperation. That works very, very well for them. So what they're doing right now is they're dispensing with the illusion of formally dispensing with the illusion of independence and sovereignty in Europe, and to some extent even in the United States, saying, look, we'll do things that wouldn't happen if you were sovereign. And then we're still going to argue that you're sovereign. We're going to go in, we're going to blow up your pipeline that brings you the cheap energy, which if you were sovereign, we couldn't do that. But we're going to do it because you're not sovereign. And then we're going to attempt to continue to argue that you are sovereign anyway. We're going to do that, which shows we're not there to protect you and we're not working in your best interest. But we're still going to use our propaganda machine to make the argument we are acting in your best interest. And of course, what do we have now? The censorship industrial complex. So now those of us who are saying, it wouldn't surprise me with this video if they said, most likely, I would suspect that most likely, and this was a tell, here's a tell, this video will be like demonetized, threatened, they'll look at that and say, holy crap, Reich 3.1, the beast reawakens, Imbeciles, this guy's on to us. Holy crap, we can't have that. If there's nothing to this video, they'll probably just let it fly. All right, well, who cares? This is Reich 3.1. Let the video go. But in the same way that Twitch looked at this and said, oh boy, Reich 3.1. Oh, yeah, we probably better not let that one go. And Twitch said, nah, I don't like the name. I'm thinking YouTube's probably going to look at it and say, ooh, Reich 3.1, we can't have, we can't have you ratting us out, dude. We got to, I don't know. The good thing is, I'm on Rockfin and Rumble. so they can demonetize it, they can throw it off. And of course, what I'll do then when when and if they demonetize it or throw it off, what I do then is I get everybody to go on to X and to put it up and say, hey, guess what? This was thrown off, demonetized, everything else in the world on YouTube. You need to go to Rockfin and Rumble to see why. You need to go to Rockfin and Rumble and say, so you can see that when someone gets a little too close over the target, they get thrown off with YouTube, but they don't get thrown off on Rockfin and Rumble. So you probably need, no probably about it, you need to be on Rockfin and Rumble so you can see the kinds of things that they don't want you to see. So I'm suspecting YouTube's going to toss me. And then we as a collective group, when they toss this, we can use that to say, why do you think they tossed it? If it wasn't a threat to them, they wouldn't. Why do you think they demonetized it? Why do you think they threatened Garland? If it was a threat, if it was not a threat to them, if it was just garbage, they'd laugh and turn their heads and say, Reich 3.1, that's silly. Go ahead with their, go on there, Garland, with your crazy QAnon stuff, wouldn't they? I suspect that Twitch was the tip of the iceberg. When Twitch said, when I started this off, that's why I couldn't get it going. I started to try to start this thing, and I got when I went to start this video, something popped up that said Twitch says that the title of this video is pretty much unacceptable. Let's see what YouTube says. I can guarantee you this, Rockfin and Rumble ain't going to have a problem with it. That's why you need to follow me on Rockfin. That's why you need to follow me on Rumble. So let's continue. So what we're looking at is, I think also is, we're looking at another interesting phenomenon, and that is what we're told is that the ultra right, the far right, right? That's who's the ultra nationalist. Those are the only people that can become fascist, right? The only people that can become fascist are ultra nationalists. Now, of course, if you are right wing or a conservative, ideologically speaking, it works for you to say the only people that can become fascist is socialists and communists, right? Because that's the ideological argument. That's the way of saying I'm the good guy and the people that I disagree with are the bad guy, right? But what we're learning, if we don't just use our ideology and say I'm a left winger, so the people on the right are fascist, or I'm a right winger, so the people on the left are fascist. If you don't just use a self-serving ideology, you can really understand fascism. And you can see here now that, interestingly enough, these, I guess we will call them liberals, right, are leading the charge. Not the socialists in America. The socialists and communist parties in America, people in America are saying, hey, this is a bunch of crap. Look at the Uhuru movement. African People's Socialist Party. And what are they saying? They're saying we side with the Russians, because they're fighting against imperialism. They're saying we side with the Chinese because they're fighting against imperialism. They're anti-imperialist. The African People's Socialist Party. Look at CPI USA. Look at the socialists here and there, except for the fake socialists. But they're saying we're anti-imperialist. We stand against the U.S. empire, right? A lot of libertarians say, hey, time out. Now, there's a nasty little strain in the Libertarian Party that's really kind of goes along with bad stuff, but there's a nasty strain in all over the place. You'll find some so-called left that I'm not so thrilled with. You ever see, what is it, the World Socialist Web, WSWS, or whatever, those idiots over there, not too thrilled with them, if you ever read their crap, right? But they have a little bit of good stuff, but it's real. I'll put it to you like this, they got one foot in the in the basket with the liberals and a half a foot in the basket with socialists. So there are those in the Libertarian Party, there's those in the socialist movement, there's a strain everywhere that you can find that are scumbags that are going to align with the fascist liberals. But bottom line, in America right now, I think the fascism is led by two groups. That is, number one, there's no one or two, 1 and 1A or 1A and whatever, 1/1 and 1.1. So let's get into the two groups. In America, the fact of the matter is there always has been a fascist element, right? Part of it is in the conservative movement. Absolutely. Part of it, there's an element that's in the conservative movement of America that's always been pro-war and violent and angry. But keep in mind something: the history of conservatism in America were anti-interventionalists. I would say Donald Trump, who's libertarians, probably more the anti-interventionalists, but there's been a very anti-interventionalist strain. Not that I agree with them on much else, but an anti-interventionalist strain in conservatism in America. But there's also been a nasty fascist element, and there's mingling in that. Now, the liberals now, right now, I would argue that Joe Biden and the liberals are leading. They are the leading edge of fascism in America, the leading edge. They try to argue that we've got to stop Donald Trump because he's going to bring in fascism. Don't get me wrong. I think Donald Trump is kind of a conservative right winger. I think he's kind of a traditional conservative. I think he can be over the top and over the edge when it comes to some things. And here's what Donald Trump is not. He's not an intellectual. Donald Trump is not going to sit down and think things out in a philosophical manner. You know, he's kind of a bull in a shiny shop, right? That brand of conservatism that, you know, just takes a sledgehammer and an axe and starts swinging it in all directions. And to some extent, to be quite frank, that's what some people like about Donald Trump. Some people want somebody to come into the White House with an axe, and they don't care what he does as long as he swings that axe. So Donald Trump is very attractive to a lot of people who are very furious at the system. But there's a nasty, does Donald Trump have some elements of fascism to himself? He does have some. I would argue more rather than fascism. I would argue he has an element of authoritarianism to him. I'm the guy, I'm a right-wing strongman. And for those who want a right-wing strongman, Donald Trump's your guy. Whether that's fascism or not, I don't know. A right-wing strongman, yeah. Now, whereas Joe Biden, let me say this. There's something happened that I'll never forget. I'll never forget this. It was during COVID. And there was a Washington Post article because they came out with the jab and they were saying, take the jab, please be nice, take the jab, help your friends. It's, blah, 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 right? It's, what is it? Safe and effective, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of people weren't biting the hook. Yours truly, included. And there was an article in the Washington Post. And I read it and it said, we are tired. We've used the carrot and that didn't work when it comes to the jab. So we're going to have to go to the stick. I never forgot that because that was something interesting. It was a mindset. It was a frame of mind that said, and it's something that I don't believe in. You know what I mean? If you believe in freedom to some extent, if you believe people should have some personal freedom, particularly when it comes to their own body, you're not going to say, let's use the stick. That is what? That is forcing the people. That is punishing the people, right? What are you going to do? Well, they won't take the jab. What are we going to do now? Now we're going to get heavy-handed. We're going to force them. We're going to punish them. What kind of things did they do? They fired people, and not just fired people. They then passed rules that says if you get fired, you can't get unemployment insurance. They said the people that won't do Americans, not people in another country, the people that won't do what we tell them to do, we will destroy them. In effect, what they did was they took the machinations that they used abroad, right? We're going to sanction this country, Venezuela, Cuba, Syria, whatever, right? We're going to sanction these people until they starve and die and suffer, right? They had no conscience about that because fascists don't have a conscience, right? And they brought it home. And they said, what we're going to do is we're going to make Americans do what we want them to do. And those that won't, we'll force them to suffer. We'll force them into absolute abject poverty. They won't have a job. And they won't be able to be getting any money coming in for unemployment insurance. We're just going to destroy them. They'll lose everything if they don't do what we tell them. And that was, to me, I'm not saying it was a turning point. It was an eye-opening point. It was something that said to me, so we have a government that's just angry and hateful, that says you do what I say or I'll destroy you. This is what they've been doing overseas. So why wouldn't you think they would do it here? That was the mentality of these people, the fascist mentality, the brutal mentality that says people do what I say or I'll kill them. And that's what they were saying to people here. I mean, just think if you were getting cancer treatment or something like that, some terrible disease, and you had to have health insurance. And they said, you'll lose your health insurance. You can lose everything. You're going to die if you don't do what we tell you to do. Now, think about this. What they were arguing is you have to do this. Why? Why? Oh, that protects your life. Now, there were those of us who had greatly questioned that. But my point is, which to me, you got a right to ask questions about it. If somebody says it'll protect your life, you got a right to say how and why and give me some information and data that shows me that. And then I should still have the choice. But they were saying, we're giving you something why it protects your life. Well, what happens if I don't take it? Then you're going to die. We'll kill you. We'll set in motion the things that's going to cost you your life if you don't do what we tell you to do to save your life, which goes to show that they weren't concerned about your life. They weren't looking out for your best interest. It was simply, you'll do what I tell you to do or you'll die. That's what it was. It wasn't I'm looking out. It was under the guise of looking out for your best interest. But in ultimately, it was saying, if you come to them and say, look, what's the jab for to save your life? Okay, that's what your argument. Now, if I get fired, don't take it and get fired, I lose my health insurance and I'm getting treatment for fill in the blank and I'm going to die. Don't you want to save my life? Yes. So take the jab. Well, what if I don't take the jab? Then I'll die of something else. Oh, well, we don't care if you die of that. Good. Then maybe other people see you die and they'll do what we tell them to do. The only thing they really cared was that you did what you were told. This was about being in charge. And that is a mentality. That's the way of viewing the world. And at that point, you realize something. It isn't that they just look at it like that's their view of the world. So then they say to other countries, do what we told. And what are they telling people to do? They're telling people to sacrifice their economy, sacrifice your economy. And we've got they have put in power throughout the U.S. empire, the Olaf Scholzes of the world, the Rishi Sunaks. Let me ask you this. Did anybody vote for Rishi Sunak? No. They put him in power. What about Olaf Scholz? Was there a vote? Well, what options did the people have? And think about Macron. What options did they have other than Macron? So what they do is they create an environment such as the SPD and the Greens. You can choose between those, or you can have them both. How about this? Labor or the Tories? You can choose or you can have them both. How about this? The Republicans or the Democrats? You can choose between the two, or you can have them both, because all you get is both. So all throughout the empire, they set up an environment where there was no real choice, where there was the illusion of choice, the illusion of democracy. But they had already set the table where they had their people, Keir Starmer versus Rishi Sunak. Do you think you're going to get a change? No, because the table is already set. Heads I win, tails you lose. Which means what? It means they don't believe in democracy. They don't like democracy. They hate democracy. They don't want democracy. These people are fascists. That's what we're looking at. We are looking at fascism. And I have to say this. People always discuss Nazi Germany. And what do they say? How did that happen? Why didn't the people stand up? Why didn't they? Ask yourself today. Look at what's happening in Gaza. Is this any different? In fact, I'll say this. To some extent, the Nazis had to hide from their people what they were doing, right? There were a lot of Germans who went along with it, but there were also a lot of Germans who didn't know what was going on or convinced themselves they didn't know what was going on. They weren't completely above board with it. They were above board with the anti-Semitism, but let's face it, anti-Semitism had been above board in Europe for 1,000 years. What the anti-Semitism in Europe wasn't new. It's no shock that they built put Israel on halfway across the planet, all the way over in the Middle East. And then they said, okay, all the Jews, yeah, why don't you go over there where it's safe? Because it ain't safe here. I mean, isn't that the foundation of Zionism? The foundation of Zionism is, hey, you're not safe in Europe or America. The only place you're really safe is over there. That's interesting. The leaders of Europe and America telling the Jews that they're not safe in Europe and America, that the only place for them to be safe is over there. One could argue that they ain't safe here. Look, if the leader of the country says you ain't safe here, you probably ain't. They really admitted that after thousands of years of anti-Semitism that crescendoed in the Holocaust, they felt that it was time for the Jews to relocate. Why? Because you're going to get it again. Because This is an anti-Semitic kind of continent, and if you keep sticking around here, you're gonna get another Holocaust. Just a matter of time. Your best bet is to head over there to Palestine and take their land. That's kind of the way things were viewed. So now what we have now is we're looking at Gaza. And Gaza is what? So ask yourself this. Why is it that the Israelis participate in Eurovision? They ain't in Europe. The Israelis can come to the Paris Olympics in the midst of a in the midst of committing a Holocaust. But the Russians aren't welcome in Paris. The Russians aren't welcome. So the people that are committing a Holocaust are welcome. But the people that aren't welcome. Why? Let me ask you this. The original Axis, Germany, Japan, Germany, Germany and Japan, but they had Italy, etc. But so now the United States is aligned with who? They're aligned with Germany and Japan against who? Against Russia and China. Who were the original Nazis against Germany and Japan? Who did they hate? They hated China. They hated Russia. Right? They hated the same people. So here's the difference. Germany and Japan hate China and Russia. Okay, what about now? The United States and Germany and Japan hate China and Russia. Really? So the United States and Germany and Japan have gone to Russia's border and they're threatening Russia, and they've gone to China's border and they're threatening China. The same people are doing the same thing. It's just the U.S. this time is pretty open about their support. And before they allowed Germany and Japan to be really the face of the thing, right? Because the plan all along was for Germany and Japan to work for the US and the UK and Western Europe and to do their dirty work, to be the bad guys, to be their pet werewolves, to go out and tear everything apart. But as werewolves tend to be, they get a little bit out of control. They don't listen to their masters real well, right? So they turned and they, scratched their masters up and bit them a little bit, and they had to put their dogs, they had mad dogs, they had to put their dogs down. Now they're like, we don't have to put the mad dogs down this time because we ain't going to let them have the leash. We're not going to take their off the leash. We're going to be the mad dog now. We're going to be in charge, and we're going to use Germany and Japan as tools, and might I add, as expendable tools. So now that the U.S. is running the show, the rest of them are expendable. Now, Israel's not expendable, but here's why. What did the Japanese, what was upsetting the Japanese? Why did they attack Pearl Harbor? They attacked Pearl Harbor because the United States was sanctioning them and stopping them from getting fuel. They needed fuel. They needed oil. Run your war machine, you need oil. When the Germans were deciding which country to attack next, what did they look at? They looked at the industry they had. Oh, we need ball bearings. They looked at this country. They wanted the Middle East. Why? They wanted oil. It was about natural resources. They wanted to run their war machine off the natural resources, and they would look at the next country to see who had what natural resources and what industrial power they needed. What is the U.S. doing right now? It has Israel there at the lifeblood of international industry is oil, and the Israelis are not expendable, because the U.S. has to have their claws on that oil. They have to have that military base there where that oil is. They can't lose that. So they don't care. Kill all the slaughter people, do whatever you want to. As long as you stay there, we got to have our grips on that oil. And now, because Germany and Japan got out of hand the last time they tried to use them, they got off the leash. They just ain't letting them off the leash. So now Germany and Japan, what they're saying is, don't buy stuff from Russia and China. Really, where can we buy it from? Only me. Why? Because now I got you under control. Now you're going to be poor. You're going to be desperate. In the same way they keep their people poor and desperate, right? They keep the individuals, the citizens poor and desperate, so the poor and desperate can't push back. They keep Germany and Western Europe is all, they're making it poor and desperate, so it doesn't have the ability to push back. And the only place it's going to be able to get its gas or what have you from is the U.S. You know what's interesting? The U.S. says that's, so don't worry about losing your natural resources, your gas and oil and stuff like that from Russia. Don't even worry about it. We'll provide it, right? Well, that leaves out one factor. It leaves out the cost. We'll provide it for you, okay, but it ain't going to be cheap. Exactly. So we'll give you enough that you don't starve. We'll give you enough that you don't freeze to death, but we'll give it to you at a price so exorbitant that you're going to be on the verge of freezing to death. You're barely going to be able to afford it, so we can keep you on a leash. You can't get off the leash this time because we're going to keep you impoverished, and you got to get your gas from us. So now Germany, you can't get off the leash. Japan, they're doing everything they can to cut Japan. Number one, Japan was getting a lot of energy from Russia. We got to cut that off. And Japan, their economy is tightly interwoven with China. We got to cut that off. And Japan's economy is going to the toilet, and so is all of Western Europe. So now the U.S. is going to say, we're going to keep all of our vassals weak, just strong enough that they're surviving, and weak enough that they got to depend on us for everything. And this time, see, we're smart. This time, our dogs aren't going to get off the leash. Germany and Japan got on the leash, and we had to fight them to get them down. Right? You ever have a dog that gets off the leash, and some dogs, if they get off the leash, they'll just wander. You go click the leash. But other people have dogs that get off the leash, like my sister's dog. If that son of a gun gets off the leash, you got to chase the hell out of that dog. He's running all over the community. He's going in different directions. You're chasing the damn dog. Leo, will you get over here? Leo, come here. Leo's standing here, wag his tail. You run up to him, he takes off again. So you got to chase this damn dog for an hour. And by the time you finally catch the dog, you're damn near ready to strangle him. But you're like, well, I can't strangle the dog because that would be abuse of animals. But damn it, Leo, one of these days you're going to push me too far, right? But the bottom line is this. Leo, if he gets off, if you unsnap him, don't unsnap Leo, because he's going to run like hell and you're going to have to chase him for a while, right? Bottom line is this. They understand, Japan and Germany, if we let them get too strong, too powerful, too independent, they'll get off the leash and they'll go around attacking people, and maybe even us. So now this time, Reich 3.1 is basically saying we learned our lessons of Reich 3 and 3.1 rather than empower Germany and Japan, rather than give them everything they need to fight our enemies with and take the chance of them getting off the leash. We'll keep them at bay, and we will use them, and we'll damn sacrifice them. The opening salvo for World War III, physically, from a kinetic perspective, is to sacrifice Ukraine. We'll sacrifice Ukraine on Russia's border. And now what are they saying? Hey, we need to keep this thing going, so let's sacrifice some more Eastern Europeans. Let's sacrifice some Western Europeans, and we got to sacrifice more people for the home team. Right. And now, rather than the Europeans getting out of hand, rather than the Japanese getting out of hand, or the Filipinos or whoever getting out of hand, we'll just sacrifice them, and they'll just keep getting weaker and weaker and weaker. We'll sacrifice them economically, and we'll sacrifice them militarily if we can get away with it, if they're stupid enough to do it. I mean, look what's happened now. Now, I'll say this. Let me go from the other side. I think that somebody said never hit a dog. No, of course not. I'm not hitting Leo, but I mean, he makes you want to strangle him. You know what I mean? You know how dogs are, and they're having fun. They think it's a game, right? It's like he gets off. It's like, Leo, come here. He's running. He's wagging his tail. Leo, you better stop that. He's wagging his tail. He thinks it's a game. You chase Leo. Just before you get to him, off he goes again. And you chase him, Leo, and you try to cut him off, and you have a couple of people, and you finally get the snap on him. Damn you, Leo. And he's wagging his tail, and he's panting, and he's putting, because he's like, didn't we have a lot of fun? Wasn't that great? You're like, ooh, what's his name? Ralph on the Honeymoons. Wouldn't I like to give you yours, Leo? If I just didn't know that you were a dog and you didn't have better sense. If only you could talk, but you can't. And if you could talk, you wouldn't do it, because then you'd be smart enough to know that ain't a good idea. So you chase Leo around, and then you bring him back and you put him in the house, and you go on and you sit down and watch the game or whatever you're going to do. Because no, I'm not hitting dogs. Of course not. But somebody says Leo is a dangerous dog. Leo wouldn't bite. He'd bite a bowl of Cheerios. If somebody, the kind of dogs, everybody that walks in the house, oh, he's so happy. He's wagging his whole body. A band of murderers could walk in the house to kill you, and he'd walk over and lick them and play. He's not exactly a great guard dog. That's all I'm saying. The type of dogs. He was like a shelter dog or something. But, I don't have to tell you, Germany and Japan, he ain't. How about that? All right, let's move on. I'm getting sidetracked from old Leo, right? The type of, everybody knows the type of dog. And the reality is that's the best kind of dog. Who knows what the hell he is? He's some kind of a mutt. He's friendly. He's a good dog. But just don't let him get off the leash outside, or you're going to be unhappy for quite a while. Okay, so where was I? So from the other side, here's the other side. There's two sides, right? There's Reich 3.1. They learned we let the Germans get too strong. We let the Japanese get too strong. They got away and they turned on us, right? But let us not forget, the other people in this world had an experience with Reich 3.0, and they learned a few lessons also. So what the Russians learned and the Chinese were a couple of things. Number one, and that is, we have to be strong enough to deter you from attacking us. We got to be real strong to deter you from attacking us. And so Russia and China have embarked on a massive military buildup. What's interesting is their massive military buildup is possible because their economic models are viable. Right? They've come up with viable economic models. And I'll say what they are. It's very simple. It's the same economic model. It's this. You have a part of your economy that's what they call a market-based. I don't even know what that means. It just means that actual people that are not part of the government own part of your economy. But look at Russia. They have massive companies that are owned by the government, that bring in money, that sell oil and gas and things like that. And the money comes into the government, so they don't have to tax the hell out of their people because they sell some of their own natural resources. And that money is used to run the government, for infrastructure projects. It's used to build, for military buildup, all of those things. And they don't have to tax the hell out of their people. So they can deliver for their people. That's one of the things the Russians and Chinese have learned. If I'm going to be facing against imperialism, I got to deliver for my people, so my people will support me. So both of them have massive government corporations and corporate power that brings in money that the government controls. They can use that for infrastructure. They can use that to deliver for their people. They can use that for massive military buildup, and they can be strong. And they can be strong in the face of attacks of the imperial of Reich 3.1. Right? They also understand this, and a lot of the other countries do too, that Reich 3.0 started off in Europe, but then they're like, hey, we need to go to North Africa. We need to go here, there, and everywhere that they're going to spread. So what are they doing? You've got Iran. You've got North Korea now, which is getting a technological buildup with some help from Russia from the looks. It certainly appears that way to me. Economic buildup. So that what else are they doing? They're learning to build up their satellite. I'm going to call them satellites. I more like call them allies. They've learned that they need a system of allies across the world as a deterrent, and ultimately not just as a deterrent. If in fact the U.S. decides and its allies decides it's going to attack, they need a system of allies that can stand up to whatever kind of attack may come from Reich 3.1. So all around the Middle East right now, the Iranians are loading up their allies with high-tech weapons. And I think you're going to see the Russians and the Chinese continue to do that too, in the form particularly of the DPRK of South Korea, right? So they've learned. They've also learned that they learned this a while back, that the U.S. used economic might, not just military might. So they've been setting themselves up so that they are autarchical. What do I mean? That means so an autarky is a country that can provide everything of its on its own. Interestingly enough, that was Stalin was going in that direction. If Stalin was making he wanted a country that did everything within its own borders and handled all of its own stuff. Because I think ultimately, though the leaders of the Soviet Union back then knew that the Western imperialists were always planning on taking them out, and so they knew we need to be able to take care of themselves. And now, what do you have? You have a Russian government that has focused on growing its own food, building its own stuff, having its own energy, having its own industry, so they can make it in the face of all of these sanctions. And they've done a good job of it. So they've learned from Reich 3.1 and the time period between 1945 and say 2014 or so, 2001 could argue 1991, whatever year you want to use. They've learned watching the tactics of Reich 3.1, how they do things and what their plans are. And so they set themselves up to defend themselves both economically and militarily against Reich 3.1. The same with the Chinese. They built a gigantic industrial machine. Now they're building a powerful military machine. And here's the other part that's important that they've learned, and this is critical. What they learned is that the Reich 3.1, that's what I'm calling the US empire, created a gigantic international economic infrastructure, you know, the IMF, right? The International Monetary Fund, the WTF, the WTO, I mean, on and on and on, right? What is it? I can't think of the name of the banking thing that they just shut the Russians out of. But the bottom line is, they learned that they built this gigantic economic structure and the infrastructure that they could use to dominate the world. And now what the what the Russian and Chinese led coalition is doing is simple. It's quite simple. They're building a new economic infrastructure. They're building their own so that they can operate outside of the one controlled by Reich 3.1. They're understanding that the US empire, Reich 3.1, uses any means necessary to control its enemies. Everything that they have, they're going to use to hit you over the head with. It's like watching a Jackie Chan movie. He runs in a room, there's pool balls, he throws them at you. There's pictures on the wall, he hits you with those. There's something laying on a lamp, he swings at you with a lamp. Anything around him is going to be used as a weapon. And they understand that that's what the US empire is going to do. Anything it has access to, it's going to use as a weapon against you in every region of the world in every way they can. So they're building their own new economic infrastructure, technological infrastructure, Huawei, etc., building their own cars, all that kind of stuff. Russia's now opening, I think, is it in Ethiopia? Russia's opening a car factory to build Russian cars. They're going to say, look, you can cut us off from car parts. You can cut Ethiopia from car parts, plane parts. They're going to be building their own cars, their own planes. They're going to build, and there could be like a separate internet. Because what they're going to understand is these people will use anything they have to attack you. So we have to have a separate infrastructure and separate options. So the Reich 3.1 has learned from its mistakes, but the people that it's attacking has learned from their mistakes. But the bottom line is this. I'll kind of end things by saying this. SWIFT, that's what it is. The bottom line is this. The people in the US empire have to start calling a spade a spade. We have to look at what's going on and say, let's see, we're committing genocides, kind of Nazi-esque right there. We're invading country after country after country. That's kind of Nazi-esque there. We're trying to overthrow the world and have complete hegemony. Yeah, that kind of sounds like the Nazis. And what about those guys running around Ukraine on Russia's border with Hitler tattoos and all the iconography of the Third Reich? What are we doing with those? Oh, that's right. We're allied with them, and we're arming them and giving them money and parading them around the United States, giving them medals. And what's happening in Canada? Oh yeah, they're giving standing ovations for literal SS Waffen Nazi war criminals. Right? We have to wake up and look at that, and we got to stop mumbling about it and saying it is what it is. We got to call it out. Let them say, no, we're not Nazis. Well, really, why are you allied with Nazis if you're not Nazis? This is Reich 3.1. I think that during Reich 3.0, they couldn't say it. But this is a fascist country, and it's leading a fascist empire down the road of fascism. Time for us to talk about it. And as I said, let's see what happens with YouTube. If they throw this off, which they may, then let's do this. Let's direct them to Rockfin and let's direct them to Rumble. If they throw this off, let's just say this is further evidence. Come on. If it didn't bother them, the truth hurts, right? If it didn't bother them, they wouldn't have to touch it. So let's see what YouTube does with this. Have I done anything crazy? Have I said, let's hurt anybody? Let's injure a dog or something? Absolutely not. I just had a philosophical and intellectual discussion, maybe a bit rambly at times, but about my thoughts that the United States is a fascist country and that this is Reich 3.1. That it has picked up the mantle from the Third Reich and ran with it. That this is, and it's going in the same direction. And it's just a different, they learned What they learned is, hey, don't go around saying I'm the bad guy. Go around and say I'm the good guy. Say I'm doing it. Do the same damn thing that they did, but just claim that you're doing it for good reasons. And have a democracy, say you're doing it for democracy. And they ain't, but just do the same thing. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody. I thought I'd do this. It's interesting. Not a lot of videos come out and say this. I mean, people do mumble about it and, it's things like that. But, let's come out. Let's lay this thing out on the table. Let's not be embarrassed to say what we believe. Let's not be embarrassed to speak the obvious, right? Thanks a lot, everybody. Share this on all your social media platforms. But you know what I better do before I go? Let's look down. I had a weird start. It was only be fair for me to go through the super chat. Sobrano Brazel, thank you very much, because we always get good questions from the super chats. Claudia, hi from Quebec City, Canada. Great job. Merci. Thanks a lot. In Quebec. Awesome. We got Winston Fahrenheit. Thanks a lot, Winston Fahrenheit. We've got, let me keep going. Miss Me With It says, there was an old movie called Boys in Brazil Bout Fourth. Then an old book, That Odessa File. Definitely check them out. Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate that. Let's see. How about the Sparkster says, Joe Frazier and Rocky Balboa ain't got nothing on Philadelphia's favorite son, Bibi Netanyahu. Sparky's always got something funny to say. Sparkster says, Newsom Kushner 24. There we go. I think that's the move. Conan, thank you a lot, Conan, for the super sticker. How about we go next to, all right, Sparkster. Sparky says, to the moon, Leo. Yeah, that Leo. He was a shelter dog. And, he started off, how the shelter dogs are. He was just tight, looking around, kind of scared, what have you. And then he got a little more and more loose. And now he just runs around and grins and wiggles all over the place. And, he's just absolutely worthless. Leo is worthless. He's not going to protect you. He's not a guard dog. He's just going to eat his stuff and play with his toy and wander around. And everybody is his friend. And, we need more people to be like Leo. That's all I'm trying to say. We need more people to be like Leo. Thanks a lot, everybody. Oh, I better check Rockfin. We might have somebody on Rockfin. How about this? We've been in 4.0 since 1945. Wake up, says Kathy Meeks. Thanks a lot, Kathy. Certainly appreciate it. Yeah, but, all I'm saying is this, Kathy. You got to be able to talk about this stuff. People aren't saying it. Let's lay it out there. Let's make them throw us off all of the, let's have so many people saying it that they can't throw everybody off. Everybody, let's start raising the question. Let's start putting it out there. Is this Reich 3.1, 4.0, whatever you call it, right? It's fascism. It's fascism. It's a different brand of fascism. And we need to call it out for what it is. And they let them stop giving us that crap. We got to stop Trump. Why? Because fascism could come to America. Well, America's so crowded with fascism right now, there's no room for anymore. Thanks a lot. Talk to you all later. Share this on all your social media platforms. Oh, by the way, don't forget, follow me on Rockfin, follow me on Telegram, Patreon if you can afford it. PayPal is another option. Buy me a coffee is always great. You go in there, buy Garland a coffee. How much? $5. How many? 1, 2, 3, whatever you can afford. And buy me a coffee now is like Patreon. You can just give a one time, or you can go in there and say, I want to do this monthly and be a subscriber. Buy me a coffee side. Great. My Cash App information, anything you can do to help is fine. And if you can't, that's fine too. But just make sure that everybody shares this on all their social media platforms. Peace. I'm out.